Hey guys, welcome back to the joy of wrenching. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic again, and this is part 2 of a 2-part series on removal and replacement of a turbocharger on a direct injected 1.4 liter Ecotec engine as found in the Cruze or the Encore in this case. If you're doing this job, I highly recommend that you watch part 1, the removal process, because I may have said something, given some tips or tricks along the way that are really important that are going to help you put it back together. Upcoming is going to be the reinstallation, and I'll try to remember all the little steps along the way, but I may be going a little faster through reinstallation than I did through the removal. Both are going to be really important for you guys to watch. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like, and leave me some comments along the way. Let's get into it, guys. Let's put this thing back together and see if we can get her going again. Okay, so before we go back together with everything, you're going to want to clean this mating surface down here where the turbo molds up to the side of the engine, and we're going to use our new turbo heat shield slash exhaust manifold gasket. Just slips right on there, and you might find it easier to bend it back up out of the way like this, just so that you can get to everything on top of the turbo whenever we put it back in place here. All right, it's time to go back in with our new turbo. So we're going to go ahead and kind of snake it in down here where it's supposed to go generally. Okay, something like that. And before we put it on the studs, we want to put our heat shield in place. Heat shield slash exhaust manifold gasket. I'm going to stick that down in here. Like that. There we go. And then we can get the turbo hopefully onto those studs. Kind of a fiddly process. There we go. I say that, and then it just wants to slide right on, didn't it? That was good. Okay, so now the turbo's just sitting on those studs, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a nut on one of those studs started so that that turbo doesn't want to slide off until I'm ready for it to slide off. So let me get down here. This is one of those jobs you kind of got to do by feel because you can't really see it. But you guys saw those nuts coming off of the turbo that hold it to the block. I'm just putting one of them on. That way this turbo won't fall out of place. Well, let's go ahead and put in our banjo bolt for the oil feed line right here on top. Now you want to make sure that you replace both washers on here with the new washers that come with the kit. One goes against the head of the bolt, and then it goes through the banjo, and then another one will go between the banjo and the turbo itself. So let me slide this one here on top of the turbo, and then we've got one on the bolt, and we're going to go ahead and slide it through the banjo and try and start threading it into the turbo, just like that. There we go. And I'm just going to leave this loose. Again, this is just getting everything kind of in place. So I'm leaving everything loose right now. Once everything is secured, once the turbo is secured to the motor, we're going to go ahead and start tightening up these lines. But for right now, we're just getting things in place. Okay, so we got our turbo in place, and I've put the 4 nuts that hold it up against the block onto the studs. And we're going to go ahead and tighten those down a little bit. Those are 13 millimeter. Okay, so now the turbo is secured to the engine. We're going to go ahead and deal with this return line for the oil. So you got a new gasket with the kit, so slip that in between where the return line bolts up to the turbo, and then try to get one of your bolts started through that gasket and into the turbo. So I've kind of tried to get them lined up here, and I know you guys can't see everything
it's kind of hard to get the camera in here at the same place that we're doing all of this work, but we're trying to get you as good of a video as possible here. And it's a little bit fiddly again because you got to get the gasket lined up, and then you got to get the holes for the bolts lined up. At least the pipe has a little bit of flexibility to it. Trying to feel your way, so to speak. I think that fell in to one of those holes. Yeah, feels like it's starting to bite. So we got one bolt started there. Hopefully you can see that, and I'm gonna go ahead and try and get the other bolt started. Okay, so now we've got those two bolts tightening the oil drain line to the turbo. Got those torqued in place, and I think we're about ready to go back upstairs and start connecting everything else upstairs.
You know, unless you want to come back here and have to do this again real soon, these bolts, these banjo bolts, especially these that are holding on the coolant lines, man, they really are just corroded and full of, you know, old gasket material and maybe even a little bit of rust or some sort of gasket sealant. Make sure you just clean it up real good with a wire wheel and put the new gasket O-rings on these before you put them in back into the car. Now it's time to attach the coolant line, so I'm going to start with the harder one as I always do, and we're going to get this lower one. Now don't forget, again, you've got these new sealing washers that need to go, one against the head of the banjo bolt, and then through the banjo, and then one against the turbo. So let me get this one through that banjo right there. I know you guys can't see a whole lot, but you saw how it was taken apart, and you've done a banjo bolt before. And then we're going to put this other sealing washer now on the bolt on this side of the banjo. Okay, now we're going to try and put it up into place and get that bolt started into the threads. Get this light down here where it can do me some good. Okay, let's get that started. Sometimes those lines bend just a little bit when you're trying to take it all apart, and it may not line up perfectly, but just be careful not to cross thread anything. Okay, I've got the coolant line, drain line started, and got a new fresh banjo bolt and sealing washers on it. Everything's lined up there. All right, and the next line that we need to attach is going to be our other coolant feed line here. So we'll go ahead and again, we're keeping everything kind of loose for right now, and we'll go ahead and tighten up everything when we get everything in place. Okay, so now we're ready to attach our upper coolant line. So I've got my banjo bolt with one washer already on it. Goes through the banjo, then the other washer on the other side, sandwiching, line it up and get it started into the threads so there's no threat of cross-threading anything. There we go. Good. Okay, all our lines are connected. Oil feed, oil drain, coolant feed, coolant drain, all good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is reconnect our outlet pipe for the air that's compressed. And so you got to put this little clip back in place that you took off in order to get this pipe off of there. And remember, it kind of looks like this. And that clip is just going to go, there's 3 little slots in the end of this pipe. And you're going to put that little notch there in the bottom slot, and then the other 2 will come and fit into these other slots on the sides. And then we can line this thing up and push it on, and it'll snap into place, just like that. Okay, now that is attached, and we are ready to reconnect our electrical sensors here. So we'll go ahead and click that on. Don't forget to push the little locking tabs down once they're in place. There we go. Okay, and then this guy here, remember, has that spring clip on it. You want to put that spring clip back on it. Slides it in place and it'll lock itself in place. That's that. So we got everything attached back here. We got our feed line for oil, feed line for coolant, coolant drain, and underneath the drain for the oil, all tightened up nice and good. We've reconnected our little attachment point for this here. So there's just this big gaping hole here that we need to fill, and that's going to be with the catalytic converter. So we're going to go ahead and get that snaked back up in there. The catalytic converter has the kit comes with a new seal for the catalytic converter to the turbo right here. So we'll slide that on here in a moment. So here's our new seal for the turbo to catalytic converter, and it just goes right over this little lip right there, and it'll kind of hang there until you get your torque converter up in place. We're going to put that torque converter in the way that we got it out from below. Okay, let's see if we can't get this turbo up in place. Kind of hard to hold on to from above. You almost need somebody down below to push it into place. There we go. Let me see if I can get this bracket that we took loose to help hold it. Maybe I can get this clamshell around it as well. Okay, bracket's almost there. I got the bracket. Let me show you. I got that bracket right there, kind of holding it a little bit, and then I've got it close but not completely connected here, and we can get this clamshell clamp around there and tighten that, not super tight, just get it to where it's not going to come apart, and then we can start to finagle things down below and get those back into place. All right, I'm going to see if I can't close this clamshell and get this bolt started now. Kind of squeeze it together a little bit and get this bolt started just to hold it together. There we go. All right. Just to hold it together for right now. We'll generally orient it the way it was, kind of rotate it down that way. Okay, good. All right, well, I think I'm ready to go back downstairs and re-secure the bottom of the torque converter to the engine. All right, so down here, let's get this torque converter lined back up with those studs that we got off of earlier. Get these nuts started on, oops, don't want to lose that. Get these nuts started on there like so. We'll tighten these things down after everything is tightened against the turbo, because this connection isn't as critical as a good seal up there. And then we can tighten our bracketry and everything else down here. But I just wanted to get these two down attached before we go upstairs and secure that clamshell really well. May be able to get to that clamshell clamp from down here, actually. Looks like I could, so we may try to do that. Secure that from down here so that we don't have to keep moving the car up and down. Okay, so we're going to tighten up these secure points here against that bracket. 13 millimeter again. We'll start with the lower one. Go. Okay. There we go. All right, so we have now tightened our clamshell clamp. We've tightened here, and we can go back down on the bottom now and secure it to the engine. But before we do that, we don't want to forget to reconnect our electrical sensor here. This is our oxygen sensor, the front one. Okay, so if you remember, the manufacturer of the turbo says, hey, you need to prime this thing with oil before you get it started. And so they include this little syringe. This car takes 5W30, so we're going to put 5W30 in here. So this is the oil feed. I've just taken that banjo loose, and I'm going to fill this oil feed up. And while I do that, I'm going to reach inside this intake here, or inside the turbine, and start turning that wheel. And that way, that oil is coating all the bearings and everything inside of that turbo as best it can right now. And you see that is full of oil now. Try and force some of it in it by pushing on it a little bit. Put a little bit more in there. See if I can force it with the syringe through there while I turn this wheel. Yeah, so I'm forcing it through there with the syringe. So that's cool. It also tells you that the return line is clear if you can force oil through. There we go. So that should be good for startup. All right, so final piece of this puzzle is going to be putting our exhaust back in place. So we'll get it away from where we had it bungeed out of our way. Make sure that that gasket's still in good shape. Put it up there. And then get our securing nuts started by hand so they don't get cross-threaded. These are 13 millimeter. Secure it to the bottom of the torque converter. And let's use the impact. Not too crazy. Just enough. All right. Good. Now let's plug in our oxygen sensor here. And I want to keep it out of harm's way as best we can. So, and there we go. And see that, oh, that's routed away from the heat. So that's all back together. Everything down here should be reconnected and tightened. So I think we are close to saying we're done. Okay, so now it's time to put our heat shield back in place. Now remember, it slides up underneath this upper coolant line, and you kind of got to hold it in place and then get your bolts, these 10 millimeter bolts, and try to figure out how to get it started by feel, because you're not going to be able to see to line up the holes, and it's really an awkward angle. So just a little trial and error here, but you'll eventually feel when it goes into the hole like it just did there. So I got that one started, and then there's two more, one over here and then one down below. Okay, so now that the heat shield is reattached, we can bend this heat shield top back into place and then get the last two bolts started into it. Just like so. Again, these are all 10 millimeter. And we'll tighten those up. Okay, so now it's time to put this air intake line back on. And remember, we kept this PCV hose attached to it. And so we're going to put the PCV valves back on the valve cover, and we're going to put this hose back in place. Now it sort of snaked down through here like so. We can go ahead and put the inlet on the turbo. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and leave that loose for now just because I need to have all of this flexibility still to get all these lines back in place. So this rear PCV here, let's get this thing back down like so. Okay. This rear PCV can come back and plug in to the back of the engine like this. And then you can start those tamper-proof bolts. Remember, we got those tamper-proof bolts out by using some vice grips on the head of it. There we go. You want to make sure that that O-ring snaps into its home there. So that's that. And then this front one, I covered up this hole, keep any trash out of it. But you want to seat that O-ring down inside and then get your tamper-proof bolts started by hand. Don't want to cross thread any of this stuff. There we go. Okay, I'll go ahead and finish tightening these things up, and it looks like we're going to have to get that hose off the old turbo that goes from here to there, but no big deal. Before we do all that, before we forget, let's attach this intake hose right there. Okay, so the only thing that we really need to salvage off of our old turbo to put on the new one is going to be this fitting right here. And it's attached to this hose, kind of like a fuel line or something like that. And so I'm going to see if I can't get one of these fuel line disconnect tools to slide in there and give us the freedom that we need to get that thing off. It's kind of a tight fit, obviously, and it's right on that bend, so it may or may not work. But this is what you would think you need to do. Oh, there we go. So there we are. We got it off, and we were able to just get one of these little boogers around that bend right there. It's tough. You know, I tried it with one of these metal tools before, but you just can't make that bend with the metal tool. So I had to use one of these little plastic white ones. But at least now we can go and put this on the car. Okay, so we've salvaged this hose off of the old turbo, and we're going to press it onto the new one. So it's underneath here that it needs to go. There's a little metal, looks like a fuel line. We need to push that on until it clicks into its locked place. There, is that on there now? I think so. All right, there we go. Okay, seems to be good. All right, and now this hose and this hose can go back together, just like so. All right, and then don't forget to plug this electrical connection back together. All right, so we need to tighten up our worm clamps on our intake pipe. Those are 7mm. And then I think it'll be ready to test, guys. Okay, so we've got the turbo back in place, we've refilled the coolant, and we've gone through the procedure for break-in, if you will, for the turbocharger. So what that procedure entails is cranking the engine without starting it. So I disabled the fuel and ignition system and let it crank over for a little bit. And what that does is it gets the oil pressure moving and oil pumping through that turbo, making sure everything's nice and lubricated up for a little bit. And then it says to start the car and let it run at a low idle for a little while, a few minutes. So I've already gone through that procedure as well. So all good so far. And we're about to go and take it on a test drive and see if it feels any different. Well, that wasn't so bad, now was it? So turbo, we've checked it out, had a messed up wastegate. Relatively easy to replace. Definitely have to take your time, pay attention to what you're doing, but it's not too bad of a job. And afterwards, we refilled the coolant system, took it for a road drive, checked the way everything was working, and no more check engine light, no more problems. So hopefully this helps you out. You know, I couldn't find any other videos on the direct injected model of the Ecotec turbo. So this may be the only one out there. If this helps you out, guys, do me a favor and help me out too. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps us to reach a greater audience. And I hope that you found this helpful and that you enjoyed this. So thanks again for watching. You'll have a wonderful day. God bless.